Today's special bonus episode of PodCRASH with that Chris Gore is sponsored by me. I'll be at WonderCon in Anaheim, California, March 16th through 18th. I'll be doing a signing at the G4 TV booth, and on Saturday, March 17th at 7 p.m., I will be presenting Wild Cartoon Kingdom. I'll be debuting footage from some upcoming cartoon shows that I've been working on. You've been hearing about them for a while. It's going to be really exciting. There'll be special guests and giveaways. It's going to be a lot of fun. Please stop by WonderCon, Anaheim, California, Saturday, March 17th, 7 p.m. Be there. I will be. But now it's time to start the show. I'm too lazy to do a podcast, so I appear on other people's podcasts. This is PodCRASH.
Chris Gore.
Welcome to the show. I am that Chris Gore. Special bonus episode of PodCRASH this week as we celebrate the Oscars. Celebrate and or complain about them. Half the fun of watching the Oscars, let's face it, is complaining about it. Hardly any of the films that I want to win end up winning, and in most cases they don't get nominated. I'm talking about comedies and genre films. They don't get much acknowledgement from the Oscars, and if you're a comedic actor and you'd like to win an Oscar, well, you'll have to make a drama then. And if you're a genre film, I've always felt that the best special effects category is actually the default best genre film winner of that year, because certainly it's not necessarily a gauge of what film has the best special effects, but what film has the best special effects that is also a genre film. It's kind of the best genre film award. But the Oscars are really all about celebrating socially relevant dramas, and it's voted on by, let's face it, a largely older demographic are the people that are picking the winners, which is fine. I've watched the Oscars since I was a kid. I've never missed an airing of the Oscars. And for me, when I was a kid, it was the only way to actually see scenes from movies. There was no internet. If you wanted to see some scenes from films, you had to watch TV shows that showed scenes from movies, which was pretty much the Siskel and Ebert show and the Oscars. That was it, growing up. In any case, our discussion of the Oscars took place on a show called What's Trending, hosted by Shira Lazar. And if you're not following Shira Lazar, she's quite entertaining. She's on Twitter at Shira Lazar, and you can follow What's Trending at What's Trending. You can also watch other episodes of the show on whatstrending.com. There's no apostrophe in there. For those of you looking for grammatical accuracy, apostrophes don't work well when it comes to Twitter and the internet. But in any case, before we get to that, just going to talk a little bit about my picks for this year. You know what? I'm not going to talk about my picks because I actually talk about them on the show. But I am going to address a little something that you need to know, is that this show, I'm doing it for free and entertaining you every week. So you should know that my short film Red, about the infamous 2 bar tapes and the bartender Red, who's tortured by prank phone calls, is out there, alcoholic. You can get Red now on DVD, and it's loaded with extras, including behind-the-scenes commentary. There's even a drunk commentary that I did on it. Go to Etsy.com, that's ETSY.com, search for Red DVD, enter the offer code PodCRASH, and you'll get 50% off. 50% off, that's a pretty good deal. I've only got like one box of these DVDs left, so if you're going to get one, get it now. Order your copy of Red DVD today on Etsy.com. Also, that PodCRASH 50% off code, that works for other things on my Etsy. I do a lot of crafting. If you're really curious, go to Etsy.com/Chris Gore's Love Spray. That's actually my Etsy account, and you'll see all the weird crafting I'm doing. It's the one podcast I've been dying to do, is a podcast either about Etsy or crafting or DIY or modding. And for some reason, I can't get myself booked on one of those. Okay, so let's get back to the naked gold guy, which is what everybody's after this week. Everybody wants a naked gold man in Hollywood, but does it really help people's careers? That's the one thing. I mean, when you look at like the history of Oscar winners, it almost ends up becoming like a curse. People sort of think that you're in demand, and then you've done this Oscar-winning role. Well, it would be beneath you to do something like Ghost Rider, but maybe you've made 2 Ghost Riders. I love Nicolas Cage, by the way. In any case, this is our bonus episode. I want to get right to the crash. But before I do, I really have to thank our listeners for listening to me and actually going on iTunes and posting reviews. I said I would read some of them on the show. So it's great. We're getting mostly 5-star ratings. Love it, says On Tour with Zykos. This is so awesome, says Kai1068. Well, I appreciate that. That's great. I regularly enjoy you on AOTS. Keep up the epic work. Thank you, Kai1068. Says that Chris Gore equals fun. This guy, Eat More Truth, says, when I heard Gore was making a podcast, I was very excited knowing his penchant for ranting. But then I saw the format and I was happily surprised to see him utilizing his many appearances in other shows. I think there's a misspelling here, with real-time commentary in between segments. Awesome, says Screamin' Zeman. Eat More Truth says fun. Love the concept, says Teen Boat. Love the show, Chris rules. What? Says BS Pity. Genius idea, says NGBDO. Now, genius idea, I don't know. There's a lot of ideas I hear are good ideas out there. They have to be well executed. And I'm never going to win an award for this podcast, let's be honest. I've not also been the person who actually ever has cared about awards. I have had colleagues in various arenas in which I've worked, whether it be books or television or whatnot, that really seem to care about awards. And I'll tell you, I think there are more award shows than there are things to award at this point. But really, the Oscars is the Super Bowl of movie awards, and half the fun of watching it is complaining about it. And that's what I like. And you will find me, if you follow me on Twitter at that Chris Gore, you'll find me complaining about the Oscars doing the entire thing, which is half the fun, is tweeting and watching it. So in any case, let's get to this week's Crash. I was on What's Trending, which you can follow at What's Trending, and Shira Lazar had me on the show. I've been on the show, actually. I think this was like my third or fourth time appearing on the show. And it's a show discussing social media, how it relates to pop culture, news, and the world, how it affects our real lives. Shira does a great job hosting this show. She's amazing. And I appeared on the show with Shira, and a special guest, actually, it was Scott Feinberg from The Hollywood Reporter. He has a column on The Hollywood Reporter. It's just called The Race. So if you go to thr.com/the race, you can find Scott Feinberg's column where he writes about the Oscar race. Although I have to say, you really don't. What do you really win when you win an Oscar? As I pointed out earlier, it ends up becoming a curse. And I think that, are people voting for the thing that they like the most? Are they voting for the person that they would most like to see give a speech? Are they voting for a train wreck? I don't know. I've never cared much for awards. I think that they're meaningless in the real world, because when you look at, historically speaking, if you take a given year of films that were released and then you look back and you see which one won the Oscar, it's not necessarily the best film. It's the film, I think, that maybe got a huge reaction or people felt was socially relevant at the time, but not necessarily the film that stands the test of time, meaning a film that stands the test of time to me is, does it stand up to repeated viewings? Are you going to watch this over and over again? Very few films that have won Oscars are repeat viewing films. I will say one year I thought was an upset, at least in my brain when I was a kid, when Star Wars lost out to Annie Hall. I thought it was disappointing, but both of those films have actually held up. There was a Woody Allen marathon on cable recently, and the films were in HD, which was great because I have a box set that's not in HD, that's in standard def of Woody Allen films. So seeing Annie Hall in HD was a surprise, and that film really does hold up. And I think the original Star Wars, the untainted by special edition and extra robots we don't need, that one is the original one, the one that didn't say Episode 4 on it, A New Hope. Is A New Hope, is that a good title for a movie? If you just released a movie called A New Hope, that sounds like an indie movie, doesn't it? It doesn't sound like a action sci-fi fantasy. Anyways, for me, a movie that stands a test of time is 20 years later. Are we still watching it? Is it still relevant? My favorite test to do, and try this, folks, when you go to your Oscar party, go to the Oscar party, and I want you to ask the people at the party, oh, I'm a big fan of Oscars. I'm a big fan of the movies. Oh, yeah? What won Best Picture last year? Silence. It was The King's Speech. Okay. Then here's an even better one. Ask, what won the Best Picture Oscar 2 years ago? silence. Most people aren't going to remember what won Best Picture 2 years ago. Try that. In any case, that's my fun move at any Oscar party I attend. All right, let's get right to the crash. Shira Lazar on what's trending. Scott Feinberg and I sort of go at it head to head. Although I have to say I agreed with him most of the time, but it's a raucous and fun discussion. Here are highlights and clips from the What's Trending Oscar special with me and a naked gold man standing in the corner.
Hello and welcome to Oscar Dailies from the What's Trending studio. I'm Shira Lazar. This is the first of 5 specials focused on Hollywood's biggest night. We'll be covering the trending topics, conversation, and be receiving expert analysis around this year's nominees, all leading up to the 84th Academy Awards. Now let's get into today's big announcements, starting with Best Supporting Actor. 4 veterans, all with prior nominations, and Jonah Hill. Chris, welcome to our studio today for the nomination special.
Thank you for having me.
So you actually checked out this whole forecast. You had it down, right?
In that category, the one thing that was a bit of a surprise to me was less Jonah Hill, because he had been nominated by the Screen Actors Guild and the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, the 2 main precursors. But Albert Brooks was a bit of a surprise. The Screen Actors Guild had not nominated him for Drive, which was a movie that some members of the Academy found a little bit too divisive, but he was the critics' choice in a lot of groups. It was either him or Christopher Plummer. Plummer makes the cut, and Brooks does not, so that was an interesting development.
What about 2 actors in their 80s getting the nods?
Yeah, either one of whom, if they win, would become the oldest acting Oscar winner in history of any acting category, so that would be very interesting. And previously Plummer was nominated for a film 2 years ago, and in the case of Von Sydow, it was like, I think it was 14, or even more than that, 24 years ago. So it's very interesting to see these two guys.
And for a non-speaking role.
In this case, yeah, very, but in some ways that requires you to give more of a showy performance. I guess silence is the theme of the year between that and the artist.
Well, let's move on to the next one. Best Supporting Actress. How about this group of actresses, Scott?
What's interesting is that Octavia Spencer, who won the Critics' Choice Award and the Golden Globe Award, is again pitted against her co-star. This is the 4th year in a row that we've had co-stars nominated against each other in this category. Only once out of those 3 prior instances did one of the co-stars manage to beat the other. That was last year when Melissa Leo won for The Fighter over Amy Adams, because what usually happens is they split each other's votes. And so it'll be very interesting to see, who would be the beneficiary if they do split in this case. It could be Berenice Bejo for The Artist, which is obviously a very popular movie, or they could do something like what they did with Marissa Tomei for My Cousin Vinny almost 20 years ago, where they go for the person who's just so different from everybody else, just such a different kind of performance, and that would be Melissa McCarthy.
So what were people saying when they heard of the announcement of the Best Supporting Actress nominees?
So immediately, Melissa McCarthy became the big trending topic on Twitter. She's still, I think, one of the most mentioned topics on the Oscar Buzz section of the site. And again, it's because what Chris was saying, she gave this really, really funny performance. I think this really endearing performance, this really different performance. And a lot of people are responding to that. And I think it was one of the breakout films of the year, as well as one of the breakout performances. She's had a great year. She won the Emmy, she's won the Golden Globe, and it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Now let's take a look at Best Actor in a Leading Role. So what did you think of the results today?
I think Brad Pitt, I think it's amazing. I think he's actually trying to be an example to actresses in Hollywood by eating throughout his role. And Moneyball, in every scene, he eats a Twinkie, he eats a hot dog. He always needs a piece of actory business, and he's eating. I think it's a message to young girls. Don't be skinny like these girls in Hollywood. It doesn't look good in real life. It only looks good on camera. Eat a sandwich.
You know what I realize as I'm listening to this with you? I realize how boring it is to listen to people talk about the Oscars. I think I should just apologize for this bonus episode in advance, because this is really kind of boring. This whole horse race of who wins, who cares? The Oscars, at the end of the day, is a show. And I've always felt that, like, it's a variety show. It's like almost like they've been making a variety show from the 70s or 80s that no one wants to watch anymore. So I really was hoping to see the Brett Ratner incarnation of the Oscars this year. We're not going to. I think it's going to be standard issue like we've seen it all before Oscars. But really, it is boring to listen. I'm listening to this with you. I'm bored. So if you only listen to half the show, I'm not going to blame you. But all right, back to the podcast. Maybe I'll say something funny.
But George Clooney, too. I mean, everybody loves George, right? And he's got two great roles, actually. Ides of March and Descendants. I mean, it's great to see him nominated for this. But also, he is so punished emotionally in this film. And I personally love George because he made that whole salt and peppery look sexy. So I have just love that he did that.
You look up to it.
I owe a lot to him personally.
We last one with Best Supporting Actor for Syriana in 2005, so we'll see if he can get this one as well.
Yeah, it's his third Best Actor nomination in the last 4 years. There's an argument that some people would make that, is he a two-time Oscar winner by the age of 50, or should he be? But when you do think about the fact that he's put together such a strong run in the last few years, he did win the Critics' Choice Award. He won one of the two Best Actor Golden Globe Awards. It looks like it's shaping up that he probably will, but there is the potential of a Roberto Benigni type situation, of an Adrian Brody type situation, where a nobody in a foreign language film comes out and just really wins over people so much, which in this case, Jean Dujardin for The Artist. So I think it's between them, but you can't write off of Brad Pitt. And it's interesting to note that they included two other kind of feel-good nominees there. Damien Bashir, this guy who's 44, he's been working since he was
starring in Weeds a few years back.
And I wouldn't even call it starring necessarily.
Well,
I mean, he's like showing up, but like the point is he's been working forever, never really gotten the recognition he deserves. So he gets in, where another case where SAG called that one. And then Gary Oldman, first time in his whole career, think about all the great roles he's been a part of, first time getting nominated.
And we finish off the acting categories with Best Actress in a Leading Role. So what do you think of the Best Actress category?
I think that, yes, people think of Meryl Streep as this person who's got 7 or 8 Oscars on her shelf because she's nominated, it seems like, every year. But the reality is she hasn't won in 29 years. Mm-hmm. The last time she won, it was a generation ago. It was and she actually has as many Best Actress Oscars. Reese Witherspoon has as many as her. Hilary Swank has twice as many as her. Wow. So it doesn't seem like it's that crazy an idea that maybe she should get another one, especially when you think that Katharine Hepburn had 4. But then you get to this situation where it was similar to when Streep lost to Sandra Bullock 2 years ago, where Sandra Bullock may not be as esteemed of an actress, but she is starring in the more popular movie of Best Picture nominee. That's the same story this year with Viola Davis in The Help, which is nominated for Best Picture.
And a role that was very much meant for that person. It was like a role of their lifetime, right?
Yeah, totally.
And then you have Glenn Close, 20 years in the making. She performed this character on stage 20 years ago, and now it made it to the big screen, which is always exciting.
Rooney Mara, that's a surprise. I love that, too.
What exemplifies a Best Actress in a leading role?
Screen time. A lot of screen time.
But in terms of what makes it to get to the next stage?
I think they really have to play against type and also just be incredibly vulnerable. I mean, there's got to be something, just a side of a character we've never seen before. Meryl Streep kind of does that every time, and we tend to not appreciate it as much as we should. But it's interesting that The Help has, along with the Best Supporting Actress category, 3 Oscar nominations for actresses. If The Help were titled Tyler Perry's The Help, none of those women would be nominated because Tyler Perry would have played all the female roles. So that's something to keep in mind. I think we're all grateful for that.
Moving on to some of our other exciting categories. Every great movie starts with a great script, as we all know, which brings us to our next 2 categories. First, let's take a look at the nominees for Best Adapted Screenplay. So let's talk about the nominees, Chris, that stood out for you.
Moneyball, number one, because that adaptation has to be the most difficult because it's a book about math. And somehow they made math cool and exciting and look suspenseful in a movie about baseball.
And it was a rewrite.
Yes.
It was a rewrite that now has an Oscar nomination. That's unheard of.
Yeah, so it's unbelievable considering what the source material was and considering that they could make a sports film to appeal to non-sports fans. I think is brilliant. So that one is my pick and my personal favorite.
And 2 former Oscar winners who are part of it. I mean, you're talking about Aaron Sorkin and Steven Zalian. And so those are big ones for the Academy as well.
Yeah, totally. And Sorkin, we have to remember, won this category just last year for The Social Network. That would be quite a feat to do it back-to-back years. And Alexander Payne won previously in the original category for Sideways 7 years ago. So you've got 2 familiar names there. And I think that, we can't discount Hugo, which ended up with the most nominations overall today. There's obviously a lot of support behind it. And John Logan, who wrote that, also wrote two of the other big films.
Aviator and Gladiator.
Blah, 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 blah. Scott Feinberg, I love you, but I think I'd rather read you than listen to you. So you can read Scott Feinberg's column at thr.com/therace. And I have to explain to you why I'm not really participating as much as I would normally on something like this, because I had gotten up at 4 a.m. to add some color commentary to the E-News that day, just as a favor. Go over to the E-News, and I went to the Academy where they made the Oscar announcements. It was very formal. So I had not slept that night, and I was even late getting to the What's Trending thing. I literally skated in at noon and sat down as the camera cut to the panel. It was actually kind of exciting, like an action movie, but I hadn't slept. I was kind of out of it, and I have to say the content of what Scott Feinberg is saying is fantastic. I think I'd rather read him than listen to him, and this is coming from a guy that I hate the sound of my own voice. Anyways, back to the rest of the highlights, and then I will present my annual Os-Gores. These are my picks for this year's Oscars. Okay, back to What's Trending, Shira Lazar, and the sound of Scott Feinberg's voice, which I want as an app so I can fall back to sleep at night.
Best animated feature. So what do you guys think about this race for best animation?
Well, I mean, what's interesting is actually Jennifer Yu Nelson, who directed Kung Fu Panda 2, is the most successful female director in Hollywood because of Kung Fu Panda 2. I mean, that thing made so much money. It's just, if you go by dollars alone, she's the most successful female director. And I love this category because it is a breakaway from, the Best Picture, which tends to be something that addresses a social issue. Animation is about pure fun for the most part, with maybe a social message snuck in there. So I think it's anybody's game in this. I mean, personally, looking at these, Rango is my favorite because I think it works on both an adult level and a kid level.
And you love Johnny Depp.
I love Johnny Depp, and it's also so different from what we're used to. So much of animation, this sort of cute style or fairy tale. Rango is just a bizarre, whole new type of look that we haven't really seen.
A lot of international ones as well.
It's a very interesting group this year in the sense that you do have the two DreamWorks movies, Kung Fu Panda 2 and Puss in Boots, but you don't have the Pixar one that was eligible, which is the first time in this whole run of this category.
No matter what, no mater what technology is out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tintin was great. I don't know why it's not in this category, but there is something against motion capture. I mean, Andy Serkis was not nominated. Everybody expected him to be for Rise of the Planet of the Apes. And if you look at what he did, if you compare his performance as Caesar, in split screen, you see Andy Serkis, then you see the final animation. It's no different than an actor just putting on pounds of makeup. That performance really shined through. So I'm really sorry that motion capture is the big loser this year. Tintin was great. And nobody has gone to see it.
And he was responsible for that too.
Yeah, as well.
Yeah.
And now on to the big two, the two we've been waiting for. First up, Best Directing. So, Chris, what do you think? Any surprises here?
Not a lot of surprises, actually. I mean, I think everybody expected The Artist. Hugo with Martin Scorsese, I would really love to see him get up there and get that award. And then we know Woody Allen is just not going to show up. I know, it's a drag. But yeah, I'd love to see Scorsese win in this category.
And Terrence Malick actually was trending on Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's somebody that's also not going to show up.
Yeah, exactly, I know.
No, but, Terrence Malick, last nominated 13 years ago. Woody Allen.
And finally, the 9 nominees for Best Picture. Let's get right into it, shall we? What were your first impressions of the nominees?
These are all worthy films. I'd love to see something like Moneyball get in there. I think The Help, and it's really going to be about between The Help and The Artist. I think those two have the edge. The Help having the social issue, and then also The Artist actually does deal with social issues. I mean, it's the only film actually nominated this year in any category that directly talks about in some way the economic crisis that's happening in the United States. I mean, it's set in the era of the Great Depression and the stock market crash in 1929, and no other films has addressed that. I mean, with all due respect to The Descendants, it's really a bunch of rich white people deciding what to do with their money, and that sounds like a great topic for a movie, but I feel like that just is, in a way, I feel like it's ignoring what's happening across the United States.
Yeah, definitely. What factors are the most important to consider when picking the best picture of the year, Scott?
Well, in terms of predicting what the best picture of the year is, you have to look at the fact there's two counter arguments that can be made about Hugo, where the film.
It really is like a mixed bag of stuff. And I gotta say, you are the Oscar savant. I want to download the app of you.
Seriously.
I
That's
want you
why
to
we
be my
have them.
Oscar bookie and take my bets.
Seriously,
blood.
can you fill up my
You're
Oscar
amazing.
my Oscar ballot so I can win the pool?
We pick them well. So any final thoughts from our online audience?
Well, again, I think it's really about the artists. As I said earlier, the early results that we're seeing from Nielsen Media Insights is that they are the biggest, most buzzed about movie is the artist. And I think that says a lot, actually, even when you look at something like Twitter.
Also, it has, a lot of people forget this, the best dog performance of the year by Jack Russell Terrier.
Absolutely.
Uggy.
Uggy.
And Uggy has been on so many talk shows because most of the cast speaks French only. They bring the dog on to kill time.
He speaks as much English as
Yeah, exactly. But the dog's so adorable.
Okay, folks, so that's it from the highlights of what's trending. But now it's time for the 2012 Os-Gores. These are my predictions and favorites for this year's Oscars. But not so much predictions, as these are the ones I would also like to win, which means I'm probably going to be off. I'll get these maybe 50-50. Let's start with original song. It's Man or a Muppet from the Muppets. Original score, Hugo. Sound editing, Hugo. Sound mixing, Hugo. Film editing, Hugo. Costume design, The Artist. Visual effects, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I think that's going to win. That's going to get the nod because Andy Serkis really should have been nominated for his performance. Live action short film, The Shore. Animated short, La Luna. Adapted screenplay will be Alexander Payne for The Descendants, and Nat Faxon and Jim Rash also there. Original screenplay, Annie Mumolo and Kristen Wiig. I think that's if they're going to win for Bridesmaids. Art direction, Hugo. Makeup, The Iron Lady, because they made Austin look like Austin Powers. She looks awful in that film. Whenever you take a beautiful woman, you make her look awful. There's Oscars involved. Okay, cinematography, The Tree of Life. That will get a nod. Animated feature, Rango. Foreign language film, In Darkness from Poland. I haven't seen any of these movies, but I'm part Polish, so I'm voting for In Darkness, Poland. Documentary short, Saving Face. Documentary feature, If a Tree Falls. Supporting actress, Melissa McCarthy for Bridesmaids. Supporting actor, Max von Sydow. Why? I love Ming the Merciless from Flash Gordon. Director, Martin Scorsese for Hugo. Actress, Meryl Streep for The Iron Lady. Actor, George Clooney for The Descendants. And Best Picture, The Artist. So those are my picks. I really want to thank Shira Lazar at What's Trending. You can go to whatstrending.com or follow them at What's Trending, and you can follow at Shira Lazar, Lazar, and get in some plugs. Follow the show at PodCRASH Show. Follow me at that Chris Gore. Check out our Facebook page, facebook.com/PodCRASH. You'll get a glimpse into photos from the recording of some of our podcasts and goings on. There's pictures and participation. Also, go to iTunes, give us a 5-star review if you think we deserve it. And as I like to say every week, let's get out of here.
After that, it got pretty late, and we both had to go. But it was great seeing Annie again. I realized what a terrific person she was, and how much fun it was just knowing her. And I thought of that old joke, this guy goes to a psychiatrist and says, "Doc, my brother's crazy. He thinks he's a chicken." And the doctor says, "Well, why don't you turn him in?" And the guy says, "I would, but I need the eggs." Well, I guess that's pretty much now how I feel about relationships. They're totally irrational and crazy and absurd, but I guess we keep going through it because most of us need the eggs.
Hey, if you're still listening to this, you're probably a lot like me. You're the kind of person who watches the entire end credits of a movie. I like you. We're a lot alike. And for that, you shall be rewarded. The first 5 people to go to facebook.com/podcrash and post "Let's Get Out of Here" will win a free DVD. That's right, a free DVD. But you gotta go to facebook.com/podcrash, like the page, post "Let's Get Out of Here," and then I'll send you a free DVD. It's easy as that. Do it. Later.